Hello everyone, welcome back to the RedSeaPodcast in a mood that's completely the opposite of what yesterday show was, and hopefully in a quality that's completely the opposite of what yesterday's show was, because watching it back, I realized that my audio was all messed up, so I hope that was bearable at the very least. And I am finally once again joined by the man that has covered me off countless times on this show. How are you?
I'm good, man. Glad to be back.
Yeah, been a bit honestly, and I don't think that there was a better episode for you to be back, a better episode to look back at everything at the insane season that we have had. And honestly, if you're asking me, I could use the injection of positivity in my veins after what the last 4 days have been, because God, is it continuing to be bad? Uh, Honestly, I was just hoping to start with your your general thoughts, just knowing the season is over, knowing what we did, what we achieved. Was it better than you expected? Was it as you expected? Did you want more? Would you change anything?
I mean, I think on the whole, it's probably what I expected. And I mean, in the context of the past few years, that's a success because we have not been achieving expectations the past few years since really things fell apart under Pedro Martins. But the expectation every season for Olympiacos, especially in football, is win the league and probably at least make the cup final. Obviously, we did both of those things and we won the cup as well. So I think it was at expectation season, but in a good way. Um, Obviously, Europe was disappointing, but to a certain degree, I think that we did have um, some amount of misfortune there with the first leg being you know, playing against Bodo Glimt, first legs in the Arctic Circle on a turf carpet pitch. We didn't have Ayub El Kabi. We had a few injuries, so I think we were a bit unfortunate there. And I think the way that our European campaign ended was a bit harsh. So honestly, as disappointing as it was, I wouldn't really dock the team points for that this season. We were excellent in derbies. We were excellent in the playoffs. We got to incorporate a lot of the exciting young talents that came through last season with the youth league team. So I think all in all, it was a fantastic year. We got back to Champions League football. We won't have to play qualifiers to get there. So I think if you would have told me at the beginning of this past season that that's where we'd end up, I would have been really happy.
Honestly, the only thing that I semi disagree with is that even without taking into account all that happened, why we got knocked out in Europe, I'm not gonna sit here looking back at the list and given the last point you made that we did manage to go on and get UCL football directly, I really would call the European season on its own a success as well, because making the knockouts of the Europa is nothing to be underestimated, nothing to be overlooked. We still did a great job in the league phase. We still had the best defense of the Europa League, and we got one of our players to be top scorer of the competition, even though we did go out early. So even if you look at it purely from a result a results perspective in Europe, I honestly think that's fine as well. I don't think that I physically can sit here and say that I have any main complaints if we look at the season in general.
Yeah, I mean, we played 10 games in Europe and we arguably only had one bad performance, and that was the away leg against Boda. I mean, it's that's what back to my put it of I feel it was kind of a harsh way to end because I don't think that it really represented how good we were in Europe in general. I mean, obviously there were some games where we wish we would have gotten more, but we did not have by any means an easy schedule, and we were very competitive in pretty much every game we played. We just it was a perfect storm for that that tie, where it was played, when it was played, the players that we didn't have. So, it's disappointing from the standpoint of we feel like had a couple more things gone our way, maybe if we just had Ayub El Kabi, we would have scored a goal and it would have been different. Who knows? But like you said, I wouldn't classify it as a disappointment on a whole. I would just say, the way that it ended did feel a little bit harsh to us.
I'm not even going to say that it could have been different. I have a feeling that I know that it would have been different.
Yeah.
But given what we managed to achieve, I think it can honestly be overlooked with a smile. And speaking of the squad in general, a lot of changes heading from last summer to where we are at now. A lot of changes last summer and a lot of changes throughout the season as well. And as I told you, nothing too detailed, but I feel like this is a perfect first statement for the season review, and that's ratings in general, and not necessarily realistically, but what you would do personally with every player. And of course, I think the beginning example is arguably one of the easiest ones to go on and rate, and that's of course Kostas Solakis, the man that has been signing ever since the second leg against Tel Aviv last season. That's not gonna be stopped by anyone, and God, a man that needs to be here next season, a man that needs to be here next season. He's up there for player of the season. We'll discuss that later. His moments have been insane. Arguably, one of the main moments of the season is his red against Bodo that did ultimately with what Dinamo did end up getting us like 50% of the Champions League along with Yaremchuk's goals in that match. He's been crucial in keeping a clean sheet in more than half of the matches this season, I'm pretty sure. And he's done everything and anything he can to get us in the double and get it where it deserves to be, honestly. I was leaning between a 9 and a 10. I did end up going with a 9 out of 10 solely because I've only given one 10 and that's going to come later. That's nothing to take away from Zolakis, but I think a 9 is honestly as spot on as it gets.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all of that. The point that I would make about him is he really feels like the first time Olympiacos have ever had a player who is without a doubt top 10 in the world in his position. I mean, I don't think that's a hot take in any sense. I have people argue with me about that, on social media and stuff, but you just look at his record this season, and some people can say, okay, well, he plays in Greece. Look how he did in Europe. I mean, you take that one match against Bodo away, where again, none of the goals scored in that tie were his fault because they were all from 4 yards out of goal. Um, he was absolutely incredible. Even in the first, our only loss in the league phase against Lyon, I would argue that might have been his best game from a save standpoint because he was just everywhere. Um, and again, like you said, it's really important that we hold on to him. We know that there's been a lot of interest from elsewhere in Europe, but I think what kind of goes in our favor is the fact that goalkeeper is a bit of an odd position in terms of availability on the market. There really isn't a lot of movement there compared to other positions like I'm sure we'll talk about later with Babis Kostulas. So I again I think it's just incredible the progression that he's made over the past 18 months. But it's something that I think we could have all seen coming back from him keeping a clean sheet at 17 in a cup final. That's his DNA, and he's continued to show that through his career.
Before we get back into Zolakis, I will respond to this comment with what I said earlier. It's a loss that stings because we would have spunked up Lazio as well, and I'm sure of that. But if you look at it from the perspective of what that I gave us in the long term, which is direct Champions League football, the sting goes. It honestly goes away a bit. At least I feel like it goes away. And I've shown it before. I will as many times as I can. This I am so fucking sad that the club handled this so bad where you can't get this. I am
Dude, I'm gonna have to get that Nuremberg one and just tape an Olympiacos badge on it close enough.
good. Uh, Back to this. I think that it's nowhere near debatable that he is top 10 in his position. The argument that got brought up a couple of episodes ago, I did talk to you about this argument. You full on agreed that he is up there for one of our best players in general regarding position for position. That also stands massively. And regarding transfer wise, he is not even if the most insane of offers come in, he is a keep for our life. He has to be a keep.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of on your point of what you just said, I would almost argue that he's the greatest Olympiacos goalkeeper of all time. I wouldn't argue he's the greatest goalkeeper to ever play for Olympiacos. I would say that's Adonis Nikolidis, obviously. But just on his work with Olympiacos, to me, I think there's a genuine argument there. And I think it says a lot. You can already say that about a guy who's, he's still not even 23 and he's 22 now, correct?
He's 21.
21. There, I mean, that furthers my point. I mean, the fact that he's so young and he can already genuinely be in that conversation just says an incredible amount about him.
I mean, does he really have much competition in terms of
I
Olympiacos
mean,
goalkeeper?
goalkeeper has never really been a strong position for us outside of a few bright spots. So you do have a point, but I mean, I still don't think that should take away from just how incredible he is. And again, I absolutely think he gets close to an all-time XI, if not in an all-time XI. I think it's really him and Nico Polidis. Outside of that massive gap between them and number three.
I mean, I would argue that number three is closer than we would say because for me number three is Roberto. I think there is no debating in that, but I think there is still a gap, and of course it is between them two. But that's no disrespect to someone like Roberto. We're just talking about two world-class keepers and a keeper that has the potential to not only surpass the first one, but be one of the best that Europe has offered in general. Now, moving from one of the most clear cases to one of the weirdest ones. And of course, that's someone who you and I are both very mixed on. That, of course, is Pascalakis. I can't. I've been so on and off about Pascalakis. I've flipped my opinion so many times. It's insane. I can't say anything bad about Pascalakis. I've given him a six. I can't really say anything bad about him. He's the one that gave us the cup, even though he made some very questionable decisions in said cup. He's given this club a lot. He's also given this club very minimum sometimes. And as far as I have seen, there is interest for him to go in the summer. I don't know how concrete that is. The two names that have been said are Aris and Apoel, which both sound very reasonable given Pascalakis' level right now. I am saying sell under the condition that we have someone ready. Whether that's bringing up someone from the academy again, or bringing someone in to be second, I am saying sell. Otherwise, I'm keeping him as a third choice.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think six is a fair rating. I would say maybe seven. Part of the reason why I would give him a slight bump is because I also think there's an off-field aspect that I include when I think about a player and his value to the team. And I think the fact that, he has stepped aside without problem or without seeming like he has a bad attitude about it to Konstantinos Tolakis. Obviously, again, it's clear at this point in his career that he's not at that point anymore, and I don't think he probably ever was. But the fact that he's done his job without any comment, without anything in the media, without ever looking like he's upset, and for the most part, like you said, he performed reasonably well in the cup. We won the cup with him playing every match. I think that says something. Um, so I mean, I would totally agree on all that. And as far as the buy and the sell, reason I would agree with you is that I think he is probably a little too good to be a backup goalkeeper. I think he, like you said, he could easily go start for a club like Aris. Well, I would say I would love him to go to Aris. Firstly, because it would piss off PAOK fans. Secondly, because I think he could potentially help them get into Europe, and we desperately, desperately need an Aris team to do something. So I would agree there, and I say that with all due respect. I think he's been fantastic for us. I'm somebody who used to be a huge Paskalakis hater when he was at PAOK. I thought he was not very good. I thought his decision making was awful, and when we signed him, I was not happy about it. But he's been a completely different player for Olympiacos. He's been, you know, for the most part, very good on the field, and he's been a good part of the team in the locker room. So I think he should get to go somewhere and get more significant playing time before he retires.
He's done his job for us. Uh, he's done his job off the field as well this season. As you said, I believe, as much of a wild man as he is, I believe that he's been so sort of a protector of the younger guys as well. You've seen him with uh, Botis a lot. You've seen him with Botis a lot off the field as well. They were together in the basketball at some points as well. So it seems like he's taking him under his wing, which is very nice to see. But both because he can easily help a club like Aris, who, if they don't get Thanasiadis like it was rumored earlier, Paschalakis would be an incredible choice. And honestly, we, again, no disrespect, meant we need to move on as well. A lot of positions are getting younger, and goalkeeper, even if you look at the academy, if you don't want to look outside the club, goalkeeper is getting better and better. We do need a veteran. That's why I said that I would look outside the club to bring someone in if we do sell Paskalakis, but we're nowhere near lackluster in the goalkeeper position. I said this multiple times and say it again. I think Cuesta is the most overrated goalkeeper in the
He's too hot and cold. I mean, some games he is absolutely incredible, and then other games he's Andre Onana in that. I think that you do need a guy, which is crazy for me to sit here and advocate for Paskalakis because earlier in his career he was just that bad. But I think however he's done it, maybe part of it is being in a stable environment like Olympiacos. He's found a way to center himself and become a pretty level-headed keeper. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think he would be an upgrade personally, but that's just me.
That says more about Aris than it does about Cuesta.
Yeah, that's fair.
Honestly, that says more about Aris. The next two are arguably the easiest on this list. It's Anagностopoulos, who I've given a 3, and I do not care how rough that sounds. And I think that's the easiest sell this list has to offer. And it's Botis, who honestly I've not given a rating because the man has not played. And I've either said keep as a second, third option, like give him his chance, or if there is a team that can promise him a regular football, loan him, because I think that the B team needs to have one of the younger guys that are in the under 19s now, and Botis needs to start getting used to not necessarily Super League football, but First League football, like the tougher football, not the fucking Heracles and everything like that of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree on both of those. Anagnosopoulos, I mean, I don't even want to talk about his one cameo performance. He almost cost us the cup. You know, I'm not the cup, the playoffs, getting them mixed up. You just can't have that. I don't know why we really signed him. To be honest, I don't think we really had a need. Sure, he's a great guy, but just he's not at the Dragos level. And then as far as Botis goes, personally, I would want to keep him as second keeper. I would love to see him, get to play in the cup next season. The thing I would say about goalkeepers and playing regular football, um, again, I think it's a weird position where I don't know if it matters as much as it does for an outfield player. Example being Konstantinos Solakis, right? He did not play very much at all for 3-4 years, and then he gets put into the team. A lot of goalkeeping is just your reflexes, your positioning, and that doesn't not necessarily need to be learned, played, playing the game. So personally, I would like to see him stick around. I would like to see him learn from Solakis. I think it would be good for Solakis as well to start, being more of a veteran player, being more of a mentor, despite the fact that he's young. The fact that he has, a season and a half of top flight football under his belt, the fact that he's, basically won everything that he's had the opportunity to win. Let's see how he can do, mentoring a younger player and hopefully getting him to a similar level. So personally, I would like to see him stay and be our second choice keeper, like you said. If we want to keep Paskalakis as the three, we can. If we want to bring in another veteran, I would advocate for a Greek veteran. And again, it doesn't have to be anybody very good, but just somebody that's familiar with the style of football, somebody who's familiar with the club would be great. That would be my take there.
Honestly, full on agreed. I don't think there is anything much more to say on goalkeeper. And again, with half of the squad, a controversial one with the fan base, Carmo. David Carmo is the next one I have noted down, and I have given David Carmo a 7. On one side, I can't really downgrade David Carmo too much because he's one of the most quality, if not the most quality centre backs we've had throughout these 2 seasons. But this season specifically, he's been too underwhelming for me to bump up. And as it seems, he has Olympiacos waiting again. And as it seems, he's gone, or he is gonna be gone. I don't know if he'll stick around at Nottingham or go elsewhere. But no matter what happens, I honestly wouldn't want him here. As stupid as that may sound, I want to move on from the Carmo chapter, and I am sticking with the 7, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe say a six, but seven's reasonable. I guess the reason why I'm inclined to bump him down is just because it has seemed at times this season that he doesn't care as much. And to me, that's a problem. I don't like seeing that. But he has had some quality games, and his performances really have not dipped in any major sense. He just hasn't taken a step from last season. So that's where I think the underwhelming portion comes in. I do think that, like you said, it's good for us to move on. It's probably good for him to move on as well. Maybe he does go back to Nottingham. They just secured Conference League football yesterday. They will need a bigger squad to balance the Premier League and Europe. So, I mean, hey, maybe he goes back and he can be their Conference League center back, and maybe he gets a second Conference League title. Who knows? I think that would probably be a better move for him, or a move elsewhere. It doesn't seem like his heart is as in it anymore. And obviously being grateful for what he contributed last season and this season as well. We should want him to move on, but it's also, we don't want guys here who aren't fully invested, and it doesn't seem like he is, and we have other center backs who are. So I think that it's best for both parties.
I'm seeing the comment with player of the season and stuff in general. I will touch on those. Keep dropping those. I'll touch on those when we do after we're done with the rating and the transfer talk in general. And the next one is a way easier one. The next two, I'd argue, are way easier ones. And the first one that I have noted down, this is the list that Transfermarkt has, by the way, so it's no preference order or nothing. I just saw and noted. And that, of course, is who I'm dying on the hill on, is one of the best centre back talents this team has seen, and that's Lorenzo Pirola. Pirola, who showed up out of nowhere, is a good contender for signing of the season, but I didn't note down signing of the season because it's really between two people. It's not any any real debate. Uh, and who's been more than crucial in replacing David Carmo when needed, getting, I think, the most minutes out of all of our centre backs. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I don't think I am, though.
It sounds right because I think him and Biancone, I think, were the healthiest throughout the season, so that seems logical.
Yeah, and then it's been him and Retsos to end the season. So it is 99% him that's there with the most minutes. I've not bumped him up as high as Zolakis. I've given him an 8, but I think it's without any need to debate that he'll be our starting centre back next season. So it's a keep without a second thought.
Agreed. I mean, like you said, we didn't really have high expectations for him, just knowing how young he was and how new he was to top flight football. But I mean, from the moment he came in, I want to say his first game was the Lyon match. I think it was him and Retsos both made their season debut, and both were exceptional in that match. And he basically carried that on through the season. I really can't think of a bad moment that Lorenzo Pirola had. I mean, I would say maybe he didn't perform that well. I believe he played against Boda in the first leg. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think any of our defenders had a good game that game, but other than that, he was pretty much nothing but exceptional. And like you said, he's a ready-made replacement for David Carmo. A left-footed center back. He could play left back as well, and he did pop up there a couple times this season. So it's great to have a guy who can be versatile. So yeah, I'm really excited to see him in an increased role next season in the Champions League. I think he's another guy. We talk a lot about Musakidis and Kostulas and even Solakis to a degree. I think he's another guy who could easily go for 30 plus million from Olympiacos here in the next few seasons because again he's another one that is just so young and so talented. So I'm really excited to see how he does next season in an elevated role and in elevated competition.
Him and Esse aren't really seen as talents to be produced and sold, but those two, especially, I think an even easier go for like that 30 plus million if they go on and perform well. But as it seems, Pirola will stay with the team, thankfully, beyond the summer because we need him. And speaking of need, a player that in his absence and in his presence has shown us that he is irreplaceable for this club and this team. That's Panayotis Retsos, who I've also easily given a 9. He's been a leader, he's bounced back from some of the worst injuries and years of his career, even for most of last season. Even he knew that he wasn't playing well. He worked his ass off, and now he's, as I said, irreplaceable. He's our captain. I believe he'll be our first captain next season, but we'll get into that. I don't think that anyone else gets first captaincy, part maybe Tsolakis, but a very so and so on keeper captain, so I would give it to Retsos. And yeah, I don't think there is much else to say for someone that's proven himself on the field and off of it the same incredible way.
Yeah, I mean, I think this season was a crucial one for him because we saw last season it was kind of Jekyll and Hyde with Retsos. I mean, there were times where he you know, looked like he was lost. There were times where he was giving away penalties. There was times where he just did not look like he had it together. But towards the end of last season, he seemed to find a different gear, and he was one of the biggest reasons why we won the Conference League, if not least because of his performance in the final, carrying a concussion. Um, this year was a big year for him because he needed to prove that that was not just a blip. That wasn't an anomaly. That wasn't just him performing better because he had a European trophy on the line. This season, he, like you said, was top three players for Olympiacos in general. I think top three most important players for Olympiacos, and easily our captain, easily our leader. Um, and I just the way that he was able to solidify himself and his game in general, and really find that consistency, it has been huge for us. And again, he's another one next season. We haven't got the Sipaniotis that I saw play Champions League football for Olympiacos. I'm really excited to see him go up against some of Europe's best. And again, we just said this about Pirola. Rezzo still isn't that old either. He's a guy who could potentially have another big move in him. If he has a really good season next season and Olympiacos do well in the Champions League, we've seen guys make moves, in their, mid, late 20s. So he could still have that on the cards as much as I'd love to keep him forever. So like Pirola, I'm really excited to see him next season in the Champions League.
Honestly, Retsos is one of those where if the big move came, he deserves it, but I really don't want to see him go at all. He bleeds red and he fits so perfectly in Olympiacos' system where it will be tough if he needs to go at some point. The next one is arguably the most passionate Frenchman of Olympiacos ever since goddamn Christian Carembe, and that's Julian Biancon. Julian Biancon, who a lot of people love and a lot of people hate. I think there is no in between with this player. You either like him or you don't. You're never so and so on him. I've made it very clear that I love that he's in the team. I love that he's renewed. And for his role, he's a massive luxury, in my opinion. I can't really bump him as high as I bumped Pirola and Rechos, of course, but I've given him a 7.5, both for the passion that he's shown and honestly some crucial moments that he did have this season because he may not be the most talented of defenders, but he is one of the most hardworking, and that's shown honestly incredible in a mind blowing and extremely unexpected fashion. So, of course, also with his very deserved, again, in my opinion, 2 year renewal, of course, he's a keep.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, personally, for me, I would give him an 8. Like you, I've made it no secret that he's one of my favorite players on this roster. Like you said, he's never the most talented. He never will be the most talented. But um, having a guy like that in your team is hugely important. And I mean, we saw it last season, even when he wasn't able to be involved as much, traveling with the team throughout Europe. He didn't get a medal. He didn't get to play. We couldn't register him, but he was there because he immediately bought in and invested into this project. And I think that's huge. And then, like you said, he did have some crucial moments. I think back to late January. We had a crucial home game against Aris, and we played very poorly in that first half. We were down 1-0. Biancon, I believe, had 2 assists in that game, both Dolores Costulas, which got us the win, which is a huge win in the title race. And then in midweek, scored a goal against Karabakh, which got us 8th place, top 8 for Europa League, and we needed his goal for the goal differential. So I mean, that really speaks to his value in the way that, like, yeah, he might not be the most talented guy, but he'll still pop up when we need him. So like you said, he's a huge luxury to have as a third or maybe a fourth center back. You cannot ask for any better because he would start for a lot of teams. I think he would start for every team in Greece, and I think he would probably start for a lot of these teams that we played in Europa this season, and maybe some teams we play in Champions League next season. So having a guy like him who does have unquestionable quality and an unquestionable passion for the club. That's something that's very rare to find. So I think, like you said, it's an incredibly easy keep.
And people forget that he's still 23 years old. He can still get even better than he is now. So
He just looks like he's 40.
yeah, he just looks like he's fucking 35. That's great. Uh, he can still get even better on his game and the aspects that he's lacking, and he's shown that he's willing to work for it. So you never know what might come. Now, arguably my controversial opinion of this list, and we are about halfway, so yeah, we are getting through this as fast as we more or less predicted. Uh, and yeah, Ortega. Honestly, I didn't know how else to open it. Very hit and miss. Had a very good run of games against Porto and after for a while, where I honestly believed that he wouldn't lose that starting position. And I honestly did believe that Bruno was what he needed to push himself to get even better. But again, that form slumped at the end of the season, and eventually Bruno took the starting position. He's getting a 7 because more or less of the same reason that Carmo got a 7, because in my opinion he fell under expectations. And if that offer of 12 million stands, I'm selling him.
Yeah.
I don't think we are getting a better offer. I don't want to do what Panathinaikos and Nike did. And what we have done in the past. I don't want another Cisse or Ba, honestly. And I think selling him is not only the best option for both parties, but the safest as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think to a greater degree as well. I almost don't think that he fits Mendilibar's system. I think if you look at the entire squad, I think he's probably the one guy who's been a consistent starter under Mendilibar who has not really fit the system. He's really more of your classic fullback, and we need a wing back like Rodine on the other side, who's going to be able to go up and down and be physical and have that presence. Francisco Ortega does not really have that. And again, it's no disrespect to him. I don't think he's a bad footballer, and I think that he has done a very good job in his role for this team. I think he's a guy that just doesn't necessarily fit what we're going for. So, like you said, I would totally cash in now if we can. If we keep him, we keep him. I like we just talked about, and I'm sure we'll talk about here in a moment. I think I would rather Bruno start because I do think that he fits the role that we're looking for. And I also think he has some other, intangibles that are important. Like he is a bigger guy. So I, personally, having that to go up against, especially Champions League opposition, you want someone bigger and stronger and faster. So personally, I agree with you. I would say sell, but like you said, it's hard to give him a bad rating because I don't think he was poor this season necessarily.
Speaking of, you transition perfectly. Bruno, I rated the same as Ortega, not for the same reasons though. I don't feel like I can bump him up due to his way more recent arrival to the team and way more limited game time. But the signs that he's shown show that he deserves to be at least tested as our starting left back. It's not only Bruno's physicality, but it's Bruno's speed as well. Then those two things, in my opinion, mix into something that has the potential to be very scary. If I'm not mistaken, he is still very young as well. I think he's younger than Ortega. I'm not sure.
I think Ortega's 25 and I think he's 24, but I don't
Yeah,
quote me on that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
something like that. They're both like in their mid 20s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Still relatively young. Not Jolakis and Muzagis is young, but still relatively young. So I think he's a very safe kid, and I think that a lot better is still to come from Bruno.
Yeah, and I mean, just to add one thing to everything you said that I agree with, he also seems like he has a lot of that fire and that passion that, again, I would say, Francisco Ortega, he just doesn't seem like that kind of player. Which again, there's no disrespect to him, not everybody's like that. But he seems like a guy who will get up for the big games and will get into it with opponents and push the team forward. So I really like a lot of what he's shown as well. And I like you said, he deserves to get a full-on chance to be our starting left back. But we probably will need to find another left back, especially if we do sell Ortega. So
Yeah, for sure.
it's important, like you said, with Ortega. I mean, giving him competition, we need that. We can't do what we did last season and really only have one left back.
It's I don't really want to get into names. We'll get into those when the time comes. But the name that I would like to see is the name that has been rumored, and that's Likoyanis. I would like to see Likoyanis come in if Ortega does get sold. Moving forward, I have bumped the next two together because I feel like they've been so in favor of each other, so complementary to each other, and most games they've been the perfect right side, and that's Costinha and Rodinei. Because if you told me that Costinha would not only displace Rodinei, but let him move up the field and be more or less solidified as a winger and semi-right midfielder now, and if you told me that Costinha would get a start over Rodinei in a lot of games and give Rodinei the rest he deserves, I wouldn't believe you, given in the circumstances that he came in. But especially compared to the last few years where we didn't even have one decent right back and now we have two incredible ones, I've given them both a 9, and I have seen some rumors of interest for Costinha, but in my opinion, there is no scenario possible that gets either of those two away from the team.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with everything you said. It would have to be a ridiculous offer for Postinha, which I don't think anybody is going to send our way. Um, a lot of what I've seen is I think clubs in bigger leagues think they can get bargains out of, Greek clubs or clubs like Olympiacos. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Costinha, again, he's another guy who's surprisingly young. He's only 24, 25. Obviously, he's another guy who could easily play for us for another 5 years and still be at a very high level. Um, I think he's probably. I don't. I think he would maybe be in the conversation for signing of the season because of just how incredible he's been compared to
It's
his
between him and Pirola, I think.
M. Pirola, and I would also throw Yaremchuk in there, but we can talk more about him later. I think he's in the conversation. But back to Costinha, I mean, like you said, the fact that he's unlocked parts of Rodinei's game that we haven't been able to see because Rodinei has been stuck in that role. I think is a huge value to our team. Um, and again, like you could really interchange either of them, and that says a lot. And that's not me saying that I think Rodinei has been poor or deficient in any way. The fact that we could bring in a guy who had no expectations and he can be as good as arguably our third or fourth best player, that says a lot. So I think both of them, um, hugely important to this team. Both had an incredible season, and hopefully both are starting for us next year in the Champions League.
I don't think that I could have said it any better, honestly. And speaking of incredible and very consistent seasons and Champions League football, Santiago Esse. Santiago Esse, who we said is a player that's been crucial and that's been, I think the best word to describe Eze is non-stop, because for the past 2 seasons he has been non-stop. There has been reported interest. I've given him an 8.5. There has been reported interest regarding Eze. There has been talk that a lot of offers have come in. I am saying keep at all costs personally, but if an offer comes in that is over 30 for Eze, I would understand if the club did go on and accept that offer.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. He's not a guy I want to see leave, but I think if we do get an offer over 30, I think you have to take it because again, like you said, we don't want to be stuck in a position like Panathinaikos or Ike where we end up selling one of our best players for low because they had a bad year. The only guys that I would take that risk on are academy products. So personally, for me, if we get an offer like that that is almost to a point of being too good to refuse for a guy like that, I'm taking it. But that said, I really, really hope that he is in our midfield next season. I think that um, he's a guy that he should be playing in the Champions League. That's his quality, that's his level, um, and he has been one of the biggest reasons why we've achieved the success we've achieved over the past couple of years. Like you said, going nonstop. I've said it several times on the show, especially last season during the Conference League run. He might have 4 or 5 lungs. Like I don't know how that guy continues to run game after game after game after game and cover every blade of grass. He's one of those guys that I don't think gets talked about enough, but genuinely, I think is another one that's in a conversation for greatest Olympiacos team of all time. I think you have to consider putting him in that lineup.
For sure, you have to, at minimum, consider putting him in the lineup. We talked about contenders for signing of the season. Now we're talking about a contender for disappointment of the season. And thankfully, we don't have a lot to say about him, and that's Marco Stamenic. Stamenic didn't really come in with any expectations, but he managed to fail them, the non expectations that were there. I've given him a 4. I've not rated him as bad as Anastopoulos because he did actually play a part in closing out some games that ultimately were crucial to achieving our goals. But he's gone for damn sure. And I think the most legendary thing that Stamenis has left to this team is that video with Valdez every couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's not a lot to say there. He wasn't atrociously horrible, but he was not good. We'll leave it at that. He's not at Olympiacos quality. He's not at Nottingham Forest quality. So I don't think he's going back to them. He's a guy who I could see it, you know, Rio Ave on loan next season or something like that. That seems like his sort of speed. But yeah, there's just not a lot to say.
Definitely not a lot to say. By the way, even just checking is everything with my audio and camera okay?
Yeah, you're a little bit delayed,
Just
but
making sure.
it's fine.
Uh, am I cutting out because I couldn't hear you?
You're not cutting out, but it seems like there's like a delay on you responding to me, so I think you might be hearing my audio late or broken up. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe that's happening. Yeah. That's fine. Don't. That's as far as you can hear me. Okay, I'm fine with a bit of delay. Now back to positives. Thankfully, Musakitis, one of the main two of our stars that have broken into and stolen all of the fans' hearts and have blown away all of the fans' minds. I've not, I've tried to stay a bit unbiased towards Musakitis and Kostolas. That's why I've given Musakitis an 8. I've tried not to go too high because it was his first season. There were mistakes, but how incredibly he has solidified himself and how much he's already given to this team puts him in a place for this team that no one can take for as long as he wants to be here. And that's
Yeah.
honestly without the slightest of doubts, I think. So he's a very, 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 very easy.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you on the 8, but because of the goal against Panathinaikos, for me, he has to be a 9 just for that moment alone. I think that gets him an extra point. Like you said, he's been nothing but class all season in Europe, in the league. I mean, he had the game-winning assist against Porto. He had 2 assists, I believe, against Braga. He had 2 assists against Boda. I mean, contributing at such a high level so early in his career in some really big games. Again, it's reminiscent of Tsolakis when he got his cameo appearances in big matches and stepped up. But he's doing it on a season scale, so he's already you know a few years ahead of where Tsolakis is, and he's already at an incredible spot. So next season is a really big opportunity for him, not only to consolidate his game and build on the performances that he had this year. But he's having the opportunity to showcase himself in Europe as well. In the Champions League, that's every young player's dream, is being able to play for your club on the biggest stage. So um, really no complaints for him this season. He provided so many incredible moments. And next season in the Champions League, man, that's going to be must-watch TV. Him and Kostulas, we're probably going to watch him grow up right before our eyes.
I think we already have because in a singular season they've had experiences that no one else has in half their career, both on and off the pitch. So with how much they've already given us, I can't wait to see what happens next season. Now, regarding Orta, I wish we could have rated him highly. I wish he could have given more. I wish he stayed. I like the player a lot. I've said it many times, but sadly, it just didn't seem meant to be. After his injury, he's played minimal amount of minutes. I'm pretty sure he's played like 45 minutes in a solid 2 months. After the game, he didn't really show up or show off anything. I've not rated him as bad as some others, but I've sadly given him a 6, and he's more than likely, if not 100%, good.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really give him a rating because he just did not get to play for us much this season, which is really unfortunate. We saw again, like you said, the glimpses in that 6-0 of the Andreota of last season. I'm glad that he at least got to have some sort of send off with the fans one final time. But it seems like his injury issues are going to be an issue going forward, and unfortunately for a guy like him, we would need a much more increased role than his body might be able to allow. So, like you said, I think a 6 is fair. It's hard to really give a fair rating there, and unfortunately, his time at Olympiacos is probably up.
It's exactly like you said. At least he got a proper send off from his heroics last season. Now, we've been talking about players that have failed expectations. Now let's talk about someone that has exceeded them to the goddamn maximum. And that's Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia, who also got a very deserved +1 on his contract. Danny Garcia, who's done all of the dirty work of this club's season and honestly has a major part to play in all of the success, whether that's Europe, whether that's League, whether that's Cup, and someone that's still very underrated in what he does, as out and out CDMs usually are, but that's again a very different story. And I have given him a very, very easy 8. And honestly, as things are going, he'll probably retire here, and I'm very happy with it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree with you there. He's one of those guys who very quietly this season just did everything we asked of him. He's another one where it's really hard to think of a bad moment with Danny Garcia. And similar to the conversation we had about Biancon, he's an incredible luxury to have. He's never going to be a guy that we need to be a starting midfielder, but to have a guy who could be as your third choice is, I mean, huge for us, especially next season when we will be bouncing, Champions League football. He's probably going to need to pick up more in the league, so that guys like Muzakiti, so that guys like Edze can be fresh and rested for those matches. And he's also a great veteran presence. He's a guy who can lead this team when needed. So I think there's really no negatives about Dani Garcia. I think, like you said, fully exceeded every expectation and rewarded justly with that extension.
And he's friends with absolutely everyone. So he seems like one of the most likable guys of the locker room. Now, Mr. 5 billion positions this season, a man that's scored from everywhere, assisted from everywhere, and a man that's for sure a contender for player of the season, a man that has been one of the best midfielders I have personally seen play for this club, and that, of course, is the very talented Chiquinho. Chiquinho, I don't think there is an easier nine to be given aside from Jolakis, and honestly, I think he even exceeded expectations, even from how good he was last year, because having been forced to play both the 10 and the wing this season, and him performing and giving the team, I mean, he straight up gave us not just one win, he gave us many wins with his goals and assists, and he is not just needed, he gets the irreplaceable role as well. Just the only thing is that next season I would love for him to go back at the eight.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we can sit here and discuss, where does this guy fit best on the team positionally, I think speaks to his talent and his versatility to play multiple positions. And he executes all of them very well. Like you said, I think he's one of those guys that will never get the credit he fully deserves, probably until he's gone and people realize, oh my God, what have we missed? Um, he's just the engine for this team. He's the heart of this team in the middle. And we can talk about guys like Muzakitis, like Edse, like Kostulas, a lot of these kind of younger guys who maybe don't aren't expected to have that super important role. Well, they're able to have the freedom that they get to play their game and to find their feet because of guys like Chiquinho, because he is so steady, so constant, and so consistent in the middle, and he opens up so much space for everyone around him. Whether that's the midfielders, whether that's guys like El Kabi or Yaremchuk, he brings so much to this team. And like you said from last season, I think he has improved. You've seen him in certain games, really seemingly unlocking parts of his game we didn't know he had. I mean, like the goal against Panathinaikos on the turn, where he just one touch out of his feet and then into the bottom corner, just to have a midfielder who can do that. That he's not supposed to score goals, but I would argue he's probably one of our better finishers, and that says a lot. So uh,
By far.
you really run out of words to describe what he means to the team, and like you said, the easiest nine and the easiest keep. I mean, he's one of our most important players.
And he is still daylight robbery.
Yeah,
He, his fee was in the thousands to bring him in 6 months early. It wasn't even a million.
I mean,
It
if we would have paid 10
came
million for him, I still would have said that was a bargain.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But we're talking about like 600K that they paid
Yeah.
for him, which is incredible. Again, two players band together, moving on as we get closer and closer to the end and talking about player of the season and stuff. That's Yazici and Papakanelos for different reasons band together, but band together because you can't really rate them. You can't really go on and rate them. Also, one thing I realized thinking about it, Lolis isn't on this list for self-evident reasons. Uh, Yazici got very unlucky. I'd still keep him, especially with Remy Kabbalah coming in and their incredible relationship. I'm giving him a chance in the summer, and I feel like Mendilibar will want him in the season, especially with how much we have to bounce between competitions. And Papacanelos, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If it comes down to Pneumonides and Papacanelos, I think Pneumonides and his work rate will get him the spot in the squad. So I'm sending off Papacanelos for a year to somewhere where he'll consistently play. And then Papacanelos, with his talent, honestly, he can come back and be, if not starter, easily second choice winger for us.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, like you said about Yazic, I mean, he incredibly unlucky, but we know the talent that he has, and he's still, again, he's still in his 20s. I mean, that's a guy that we could keep around for several more seasons and still have him be playing at a high level. Um, like you said, his relationship with Cabela, like you said, the balancing act that we're going to need to do with, bigger European matches. I think he's easily a guy that could, play 20 league games for us next season, to help us find that balance, and not overwork probably our starters. And he's another veteran as well. I think it's important to have guys like that that are experienced, especially considering that we have so many talented youngsters. I mean, I'm certain that there's a lot that he could impart on guys like Musakitis, on guys like Babis Kostulas, being a well-traveled and talented footballer. So I'm fully in agreement that we should keep him for next season. As for Papacanelos, I do agree. Part of me would like to see him kept and given more time in the league now that we have Champions League, but who knows what that looks like. And he's also a guy that at times this season it seemed like his attitude might be an issue and like he might not be happy with his role. So it might just be best to send him somewhere where he can play every week and be happy, because I think that's a big part of player development, especially when they're young. If they have their mindset off at all, it can derail everything. So um, I would like to see him play for us more, but if next season alone is the best move, then I trust Mendy Bar to make the right decision there.
Exactly why I made the Pneumonides comparison there. Again, moving on, two players that I personally don't have the most to say, and I'm sure it's the same for you as well. Svelde and Palma. Christopher Velde came in with a lot of expectations, had an incredible preseason that fooled all of us combined, flagged the league and the cup against everyone but Califea for some unknown reason. I am not gonna rate him as low as Stamenic and Anagnosopoulos solely because he has had some moments and ending the season he has had the slightest turn up in form, even though it's been nowhere near enough, but he's at least not been completely and utterly useless. I am giving him a straight down the middle 5, and I don't think that even what he did and what he can do will still be good enough. I think that if we were to bring in two more upgrades on the wing, which I think we do need two and not one more, he is the one that has to be sacrificed. So I think it's either a sell or a loan with a mandatory option if we can find an immediate sell. And
Yeah,
for Palma, which I completely zoned out on because honestly, he's gone. He gave one thing to this club, and honestly, I truly have nothing to say. I was very wrong in defending the player, and I've admitted that many times. I was sadly very wrong because I still think that a player like Palma can give a lot to a club who wasn't meant to be here, and I've given him a 4.
yeah. I mean, I would agree on both of those. I think neither of them are guys that we'll see at Olympiacos next season. I mean, the fact that both of them struggled against Super League competition, that stresses a point that they're probably not good enough to really contribute to this team. because we need guys who can either play Champions League or who can be very good in the Greek league. While we're giving our starters a rest, I don't think either of them fit that criteria. I would honestly say what sums up Velde's time at Olympiacos is that video of him uh, passing out in the middle of the bar and Stamenic just watching his lifeless body hit the ground. I mean, if that doesn't really sum it up, maybe he needs to go somewhere else in Greece that will allow him to play for Mykonos FC because it seems like that's what he's most interested in. Um, yeah, not a lot to say on either account for those guys.
Yeah. Uh, Zelson, I think that one word is enough to describe Zelson Martins, and that's underrated. His contribution, his quality, and his talent is underrated, and due to his injuries, it's also overlooked. Sure, Zelson isn't the player that you will look at for him to score, but he's up there. I think he almost caught Rodinei for most assists in the Super League. I think he was either one or two off. He had his most productive season with the team, I'm pretty sure, both in the league and in Europe. And I've given him an 8. I've not quite given him the 9, but I've given him an 8. And again, I'm not looking to sell Zelson in any capacity. If he's not vital for the Champions League next season, he'll be vital for the Super League next season. So I'm not looking to sell.
Yeah, I would probably rate him a little lower. I think I would give him a 7. And the reason for that is, firstly, I think he does look a lot better than he probably is when you compare him to any of our other wing options. And again, I don't say that to be disrespectful to him. He's clearly a talented player and has contributed a lot to this team. But as far as a guy that we would want to have for Champions League, I don't know if he would necessarily cut that. I also don't know if he will be able to stand up to the physical rigor of it. I think that's the biggest frustration with Gelson is the fact that he he's so fragile. I mean, it's really tough to have a guy like that be super crucial to your squad because he's going to be out every other match. And I mean, I think that was our biggest frustration this season, given the fact that he's really our only decent all out and out winger, other than Rodine, who's our right back. Um, it's just that his availability is not always the best. Um, so I mean, I would agree that he was fully enough for what we needed. And when he did play, he gave us everything that he could. And I think he's one of those guys that you can never argue that he was giving his best. But I do think I would like to see us try to find at least 1 or 2 upgrades on Gelson Martins before the Champions League, because I think if he is, a first choice winger, we might look deficient in that position because I just don't know if he's at that level. But that being said, you can't really fault him um, for anything this season. I think he gave us what he needed to give us.
I agree, but as I said, it's the difference between a Zelson and a Velde because you can get upgrades on Zelson and still keep him in rotation because he'll be useful in rotation, arguably even more useful than if he would be starting because, as you said, his main issue is how fragile he is. And yeah, he doesn't need to be sacrificed in order for someone else to come in. He deserves a place in the squad, in my opinion. Another one of the most easy nines that there is, and that's Babis Kostoulas. Babis, who we are not stressing in the slightest for some of the wildest offers I've ever seen for Greek standards. Babis, who, if he stays next season, has the potential, I'm not going to say that he will, but has the potential to be one of our most crucial, if not our best player next season, both in Champions League and in the Super League, with us changing our medical department again and bringing in Christos Theos again, who was the team's doctor for years. The injuries do not worry me because we did what we should have very fast. And Babis, as we saw with the national team collapse as well, is being protected. So I'm pretty sure that he will be fine. And unless an offer of 50 plus comes in, I'm not even considering selling him this season.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the fact that he's already come in as a 17-year-old and scored multiple game winners in derbies. I mean, he was super unlucky not to score in Europe. He had some very good performances in the Europa League as well. He's just one of those guys. Again, speaking of fit, I mean, he just seems like he's ready-made for Mendilibar's system. He's so good at pressing. He's so good at finding space. Which are he has a lot of intangibles that it's hard to teach. I think you have to be born with it. Um, you know, he just gets into all the right spots and makes all the right decisions. To have somebody as good at decision making at that young of an age is just it's incredibly rare. So, like you said, next season he should be with Olympiacos unless we receive a ridiculous offer. I think the offers that we've seen from Brighton already should easily solidify the fact that when he does go, it will be a record smashing fee of at least 50 million. I have no concerns that we'll be able to get that figure for him. But I do think that next season, like Muzakitis, there's no real rush for him to leave. He has Champions League football. He has a starting place if he wants it, and he's able to stay healthy. So I think next season could be a really big one for him.
I mean, it is in his DNA. It literally is in his blood. The talent is in his blood, and the fact that he's combined that with the hard work that he has makes him, as he has rightfully been characterized, one of the best wonder kids that Europe has to offer right now. And I couldn't be happier to see how the club is handling his and Musa's and everyone else's case. Because for the first time, I think we are handling transfers and protecting our players perfectly. Finishing off with the players, our two boys up front, El Kabi and Yaramchuk. Uh, Ayub is easily again a player that's exceeded all expectations, a player that's performed historically for a club. For me, he solidified that he is our best goal scorer, not best striker, but best goal scorer. And I think he killed every doubt that that Congo has. And honestly, if he somehow, some way, by some miracle, gets Champions League top three, I'm not even gonna say top scorer. I am going to build him a statue. My dad loves him because Christ, what is this man doing? We've given him a 9 as well. And for the man that we've spoken arguably more than most players, Yaremchuk, a man that has completely turned his season around, I've given him an 8. It would be higher if that happened from the beginning of the season, but after the change of the year, he's been incredible. He is already in the conversation for one of our best second strikers ever. And the way he's been clutch in not only winning us games, but getting us the goals that we have achieved in the season in general has earned him his place here. So both are an insanely easy kick.
Yeah, I mean, starting with Gabi, like you said, I mean, I think it's a similar situation to Retsos in the sense that he had an incredible finish to last campaign, and I think the concern was is he going to be able to sustain that? And I remember you and me talking about that last summer when we were talking about transfers and keep sell and all that. Again, a guy in his 30s having a breakout season his first year in Europe, he could have very easily fallen off the map after that. And instead, he's gone on and arguably performed even better. I mean, he finishes as the Europa League's top goal scorer, despite the fact that he only played 8 games. He only played in the league phase, and he, you know, three-way tie with other guys that made it to the semifinals and the finals. That says an incredible amount right there. And just that he's like you said, the best goal scorer we've ever had. He's a machine. It's what he does. I mean, that's all he does. He just scores goals. I mean, the fact that we still have, a year plus later, I still have Villa fans on my mentions telling me every day how haunted they are by the memory of Ayub El Kabi. Um, I mean, I even saw some of them wishing that they would get Europa League instead of Champions League because they didn't want to have any chance of playing him. I mean, I think that speaks volumes of just the kind of
I,
goal scorer he
I think
is.
they got their wish.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame them. If somebody scored 5 on me, I'd probably be like, Jesus Christ, I don't ever want to be in the same league as that guy again. I think that speaks a lot of the respect that opposition fans have for him. I mean, the fact that he can go and do that and in 2 matches strike generational fear into a fan base. I mean, that's Ayub El Kabi. He is incredible at what he does. And again, like you said, if he can do it again next season in the Champions League, I mean, we really have to start having some conversations about him almost being like GOAT status within Olympiacos. I mean, it's incredible what he's been able to achieve these past 2 seasons. And then speaking of Yaremchuk, very similar story to like Vicente Iborra last season, where he had a very rough start to the campaign. I think they're different because, to a degree, I don't believe that Iborra was used correctly. Yaremchuk just had a rough start to the year. And for a guy like him, coming where he's coming from, we have no idea what is going on in his personal life, back at home, how his family is, how his friends are, his country has been under attack for 3 4 years. And I think that's worthwhile context to consider, because that would be incredibly difficult to just show up every day and try to do your job and you have that going on in the background. But for him to play through the beginning of the season and just have a really rough go of it, and he wasn't playing well enough, and again, we don't know what those reasons are, but he was able to block out all that noise. He was able to believe in himself. Obviously, Mendilibar believed in him because he never stopped giving him chances, and I think that probably speaks to the fact that Yaremchuk was always willing to work. I don't think anybody could have ever argued that he was not willing to put in the work to try to improve his contributions to the team, and he ended up doing that. I mean, we talked about Solakis earlier securing us Champions League. Well, so did Roman Yaremchuk. I mean, he came into that game as a substitute, scores 2 goals in the second half. If we don't get those goals, we're not in the Champions League right now. We wouldn't be. Bodo Glimt would be in the Champions League. So I mean that's hugely important. Scoring goals in the cup ties and the cup final, throughout the playoffs. I mean, he did what he needed to do. He's never had any ego about it. He's never let the criticism get to him. And despite the fact that he's been a second option all season, he still shows up every game, every time he plays, whether it's 5 minutes or the 90, and he's going to give everything he has. So he's another guy who I think is hugely important to bring back next season. For the league and Europe balance, obviously, but also because I think he can contribute in every game we play. He can contribute in the Champions League as well. So I'm really impressed by what we saw from him this season. I'm really glad that things worked out for him because he does seem like he's a really good guy and like he really does want to be here and contribute. So from those two, I mean, there's nothing bad you can say. Again, you're looking back in the past few years, and we talked about like center back, goalkeeper, like some of these positions we've not had great luck in really since Mitroglou. Well, El Arabi was in there, but outside of that, I mean, we've been starved of a decent number of quality strikers. I mean, we had Miguel Angel Guerrero starting Champions League qualifiers for us. I mean, that's where we were at, and now we have 2 guys who arguably, I mean, could have started for us anytime in the past decade. So I think it's a great luxury we have to have a guy like Yaremchuk behind El Kabi, and we should be fully set at the striker position going into next season.
Before we get into the individual awards and quickly close off because I don't want to eat up your entire holiday, I just want to mention something completely unrelated to the club that I saw. There was a reported terror attack at the Liverpool parade. There was a car that purposefully ran over quite a few people, so I hope that everyone is okay. That happened a bit earlier. I just looked to my left and it popped up, so I hope that everyone is okay there. Just wanted to mention that thoughts and prayers, those things are always good, awful good. The moving on swiftly, the only 10 that I have given, and I think that for whoever knows me and has seen and you more than anyone knows where this is going. So the only 10 that I have given this season is to Jose Luis Delibat. No one deserves credit more than him, not only for this season, but for the past year and a half. And I am dying on the hill that we haven't even seen the best yet to come.
No, I mean, like you said, he's still getting to a point where he's fully building his team, right? We saw some of that this season with a lot of the roster changes that came through, but I mean, we still have guys hold over, like we talk about, guys like Ortega who probably don't fit his system perfectly. I mean, this next season could potentially be his best work with Olympiacos because he will have had the time and multiple transfer windows to build the team that he wants. Um, and like you said, he's won basically the only competition he's played in with Olympiacos that he hasn't won is the Europa League. I mean, in a season and a half, that's incredible to say. Um, and he's just brought in incredible stability, and he's really kept this team together despite all the changes. Right, losing a captain from last season, and how many major players did we lose? We lost Podense, we lost Fortunis, we lost Andreotta for the first part of the season to keep the team together and keep the quality at the same level. Um, that speaks loads about the leadership for this team, and I do think there are some on-field guys who are responsible for that. But it comes down to the manager. I mean, I feel like a team can only go as far as the guy who's giving them instruction, who's setting them up. And the one thing that you can always say about Olympiacos under Jose Luis Mendilibar is that they're always prepared. They are always ready for the match that they're set to play in, and that doesn't mean we always win. I do think you look at examples like Bora Glimt. I think that was just the players had a very bad game. I don't think you've ever looked at a match and said, I think he got it wrong. He's very very methodical and thorough when it comes to his tactics and setting up the team for the opponent, while maintaining our identity is how we like to play. So I mean, he's another one of those guys that's by the time this is all said and done is going to be on the Mount Rushmore for Olympiacos. I think there's already probably a very strong debate that he's the greatest manager we've ever had. Um, and I mean, again, just to say that he hasn't even been here 2 years, like this is wild to me, and it speaks to how much he's achieved.
Someone said it perfectly over on Twitter that Ernesto Valverde wrote the pages of what it means to be Olympiacos, and Mendilibar came in and wrote the golden pages of what it means to be Olympiacos. Now, moving on to the individual stuff and to close off, first one's player of the season. For me, it's someone that most people have gone with, and I am going with Kostas Zoulakis. I am easily
100%.
going with Kostas
Yep.
Zoulakis. And I will bring up the comment from the man that brought up the argument about Zoulakis as well. Player of the season, Zoulakis. Disappointment of the season, Velda as a player and Bodo away for the game. Goal of the season, Musa versus Pau. And result of the season, Porto away, Oraik 16. Coach's grade, A minus or an A. We agree on most of those. I'll say that already. So going for disappointment of the season, Valdez.
Yeah, I mean, I think really the only players who I think majorly disappointed would be Velde or Stamenic, but I think Velde had higher expectations, so that would be my pick as well.
Higher expectations and higher fee
Yeah,
also.
yeah.
Because Christ he came in for millions. Goal of the season, I have gone with Christos Mouzagitis and his goal against Panathinaikos. For me, it's the most memorable one. It's
I
either that or Kostoulas' winner against PAOK.
Another one I would throw in there. I would probably agree that Mouzakitis versus Pau, just because again, it's the I think the opponent plays into it as well. The fact that it's the Derby, the fact that it put us through in the Cup. I mean, that's just Hollywood. Um, but one that I would throw in there is El Kabi's goal against Rangers. I think that
Hmm.
might be the best
Yeah,
goal that he's ever
true.
scored for the Olympiacos, and he scored some really good goals. That one, that was one that got me out
The,
of my
the
seat personally.
same, but Tel Aviv exists. So yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a couple ways to look at it, but I mean, the goal he scored against, he wasn't even looking at the goal. I mean, it's just he turn around on one foot and spank it into the top corner. I mean, I don't know. There's an argument to be had there. I'm not saying it's necessarily goal of the season, but I think that it definitely gets a mention. I think that was one of my favorite goals from
for,
this season for
for
sure.
sure it does. I'm nowhere near disagreeing with that, but because of the importance and the flashiness of that bike against Tel Aviv, I don't think that, in my mind at least, that goes top just that easily. Uh, it's easy, isn't it? At least for me, it was easy.
I mean, there are a few. I think like Ian said, I think Porto or Ike. Um, I mean, I would also say back to what we were just talking about, Panathinaikos at home. I mean, that was the game that broke our streak of not beating them, if I'm correct. Um, I would say that gets in the conversation as well. Um, but I guess importance is probably Porto because that's really what got us over the line for eighth place because we all knew we were going to be Karabakh. So I guess that's the reasonable pick.
I think that I will go for the most reasonable pick. I did debate more or less the three results that we did just mention with a result that isn't really mentioned, but I did enjoy a lot, and that's the result against Braga, the 3-0 at home.
Yeah.
That's also a massive result in my eyes. But I think the 6-0 just edges over the rest. It, I think I landed the 6-0. And for the final thing of so that went longer than expected, but arguably this season deserved to be talked about in such positivity and detail. I talked about my thoughts in great detail. I want your thoughts on our most recent signing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was kind of iffy on him when we saw that um, first come through a couple weeks ago. To me, it just didn't make sense to bring in a guy who's in his mid 30s, you know, coming off of you know reduced output for Lille the past few seasons. But I do have to remember that we had kind of the similar concerns about Valbuena, and we saw how he turned out. So, I mean, we do have to give him a chance. We saw the goal that he scored on the last day. I mean, if he can do that in a derby, then I think he's completely panned out as a success. I think even if he doesn't turn out to be like a number one option for us, which he very well might not, I don't have those expectations for him. But I think in Greece for the Super League, again, as we've talked about multiple times throughout this episode, we'll need the balance with the Champions League. I think he will look like a magician against half of these teams in Greece. So to me, I think it's a very low risk signing, and you know, very very high upside if he can turn out to be a guy like Valbuena, or even El Kabi in a degree, to the sense that he's in his 30s and probably a little past his prime. Maybe he can you know surprise a lot of people. So we'll see. But I don't personally have crazy high expectations for him. I think that he's a sensible signing to give us some more depth in a position where we just have not had a lot of quality recently.
I am a bit more positive than you are, but the only thing that I will comment on is that I don't think that the club has expectations for him to start either, and I don't think that he has expectations to start either. As far as I'm aware, and as far as I'm sure everyone is aware, he's coming in as a creative solution off the bench to help in all competitions with his skills and his experience. I am extremely happy that I have you back on the show. You were certainly missed, and I'm sure the summer is gonna be as big and as positive as this episode was. Thank you, man. Thank you for
Yeah, no,
joining me
absolutely.
once again. And honestly, thank you all for sticking with me and with us for back-to-back episodes and back-to-back episodes of an hour and a goddamn half, despite one being as negative as possible and one being as positive as possible. See you all in the next one. Thank you.